anytime I get an invitation from one of reproducibility clubs, I'm delighted. And I think it's especially perhaps relevant to people in this club, because I do care very much about the message of students and early career researchers are the key to what we now call the science reform movement. And I do believe that they're a core component of doing science well. There's all sorts of challenges that I'll talk about briefly, and I'll try and go through this rather quickly. I just want to say that I have about an hour to talk through this. There's lots of slides. You can download the slides and you can see there's lots of hidden slides that I won't go over because an hour is kind of limited. But once the talk is over, I'm happy to stay afterwards and answer any questions that you might have. I can also demonstrate hands-on what it is that we do, what the outputs look like. So as you walk through things with me, write down some questions or things that you want to follow up. And once we're done with the presentation, I can give some more details about any of the things that are here. I just also want to say that every talk that I give, I try since the pandemic started. It just became a habit. Also, hopefully this presentation I upload to the YouTube. So if you want to see other things, both about the team and beyond, things related to open science, you're very welcome to go and check things out. So I'll start with the very obvious. I feel like it's an important thing to just like say that the world is facing a lot of major challenges. So I try and keep track of the challenges that we're facing. So we have obviously climate change. We had a pandemic, which seems to be easing up and the world is opening up again. But we've got all sorts of other things that are happening right now. And there's no doubt that in order to address some of these challenges, we do need credible, optimized science. And the question is, how do we achieve this? What are the key components for us to be able to do that? UNESCO seems to have caught up with the open science science reform movement, and in March 28, 2022, so last year, decided to embrace open science completely. So it used to be that I had to talk about open science and explain why it's needed, but now we've got UNESCO supporting this, and now people approach me and ask me, okay, so seems like this is important. How do we do this? And more recently, so this is just like May 20, the G7 not only talked about all sorts of things around the world that are going on, but took a moment to talk about science and technology and saying that the G7 will promote open science, following the findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, fair principles. So to me, to see this coming out of the White House, talking about the G7, having all the leaders support something like open science is really like a groundbreaking moment. So when I see this, you know, I get emotional, and it's like, maybe everything that we do does have a point. Maybe it's leading somewhere. And now it's just up to us to pick it up and move forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own domain of social psychology. Things have been tough, but I do take pride, some pride, in the fact that social psychology has been one of the first to identify that there are some issues. So I think you're aware of the many labs, many labs 1, many labs 2, many labs 3, the open science collaboration that came out with the science paper in 2015. So I think any reproducibility club discusses these in detail. My unofficial summary of the social psychology status is that we're somewhere between 30 and 50% replication rate based on all of these findings together, and then that the effect size seems to be half of what was originally published. Not only this, but there seems to be some domains, like what's referred to as social priming, that seems to be especially tricky to replicate. So you can see all kinds of different priming. You've got embodiment that doesn't seem to do very well, although recently there's a little bit more of a pushback on this. But generally, there seems to be a lot of mass replication projects that are published in some of the top journals and are questioning some of the previously published classical papers in the field, not only trying to run the same methods again, but also identifying some issues with their analysis, some issues with perhaps what we came to call the questionable research practices. So all this is important. Many times when I go around the world and I talk about these things, people say, so maybe this is like a social psychology thing. Maybe psychology has a problem. Maybe it's not really a science, just a weak science or a blah, blah science. But it seems like this is not just a psychology thing. This is definitely happening in across the fields in all sorts of domains of science. And I think the most recent one that was very heartbreaking to see was the biology cancer research that really failed. Yeah, remarkable failure in all sorts of aspects, both in reproducibility and replicability. So somewhere during my postdoc years, so I was a postdoc in Maastricht University in the Netherlands, I decided that things are happening and I should take note of this. And I actually decided to put everything that I was doing aside and sit down with myself for a year and think what it is that I care about. What is it that I think I should do in order for my future career to be credible and trustworthy? So I sat down and I put down some notes. Back then in 2016, 17, I wasn't really sure what those are. So I heard that there's something called a register report. Didn't know how to do this, didn't even know how to do a pre-registration. We need to do power analysis. I had no idea what that is. Effect size, I had some basic understanding, but how to implement this well, do confidence intervals and all that. There was a strong bias in how I understood the literature in terms of null results not being published. And of course, even the very basic thing about what does it mean to be fully transparent, I was really struggling with this, and I was actually very scared. Does this mean that people are going to see how bad my code is and that I make so many mistakes? And all of these were challenges back in 2016, 17, but I decided that these are important for me to try and implement for me to really believe in my research and that what I'm doing is both impactful and accurate. So caring about reproducibility, replicability, and inclusion equity, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is. Last year, there was the first big team science conference, and I introduced the core team that I'll talk about here. I just want to say mine is, my presentation is just a very small part of a very large trend that is happening right now across the sciences. So you can see Psychological Science Accelerator, revolutionary, just amazing. If you haven't joined us and you're not part of what it is that they're doing, so please go and check that out. It's not just in psychology, but you've got many primates and many babies, so developmental, educational. And I want to talk a little bit about my approach to doing team science and how this differentiates, is different from everything that others are doing. So when we talk about all these mass collaborations, so many labs 1, many labs 2, many labs 3, I took part in some of them, and I was trying to figure out what is it that I can take from this. So how does this influence me as an individual researcher, what it is that I do, and what are some of the gaps with these many labs, mass collaborations? And I saw that there's all kinds of challenges, and I tried to write them down. I think the most obvious one is speed. So it's very slow moving. There's publication delays. These things take forever. So cancer biology took, I think, over a decade from beginning to end to do this. Lots of bureaucracy. So when you've got lots of teams, there's like management and coordination. And every person who is not part of the leading team feels like they're a small pawn, in a very large structure, and you don't really know what is my contribution? Am I contributing? Do I have any say in what's going on? There's also all sorts of other issues about the way that these many labs collaborations tend to happen. So you've got a lot of small samples from many places around the world, rather than just like one large homogeneous data collection. It seems like it takes a lot of effects together and puts them in one paper. So the individual effects kind of get lost because if something is cited, it's cited for the mass collaboration rather than for the individual ones. It's also very difficult to check these to make sure that everything is decent, that everything that comes from every one of the labs is really accurate. There's lots of oversimplification and all sorts of other things, but I think the most important thing to me is this one thing at the end. It assumes all kinds of skills. So they assume that we know how to collect data well, that we know how to analyze data well, that we know how to contribute to such a collaboration well. but there's no real guidance and mentoring in this. And I really wanted to be able to build a team. So this is kind of like the main model that I decided to follow. So it's the core team. It's an alternative model to some of these mass collaborations. And it talks about collaborative science, open science, and meta science, but it also incorporates this in teaching and mentoring. So these are some of the principles that I decided upon during my postdoc. And I said, once I get a tenure track position, this is what I want to do. And to be honest, it wasn't really that easy to find a university that would allow me to do all these things. But luckily, University of Hong Kong invited me and gave me the flexibility to implement all of these. And I was able to revamp all of the courses and do all of these with my students. So I got only undergraduate courses, some of them second year, some of them fourth year, some of them are fundamentals and some of them are advanced courses. And I decided to, instead of me giving knowledge to the students, which now I doubt because I don't know what replicates, what is trustworthy and what isn't, together with them, I'll go on a journey where we'll do some of these replications and science together. So we're going to focus on impactful classics from the judgment and decision-making literature. I really cared about not only having students working with me, but also involving early career researchers from around the world. I wanted to do something that looks like a systematic mapping of the domains that I'm in, this judgment, decision-making, and social psychology. I really wanted to give students the tools to implement best practices of open science, and this means to do pre-registrations, to do registered reports, and then more recently, the PCIRR that I'll talk about. I did want to do actual data collection with well-powered samples, and I wanted to implement best practices about sharing with lots of checks and balances, and I'll show you what that looks like. As a side effect that became actually one of the leading things that I enjoy from this project is to build community open collaborative resources that anybody, including you, can come in, can contribute, can take this, can use this, can expand on this, and just something that is more community oriented rather than one replication here and one replication there. So here we have 40 early career researchers from around the world. You can see it's quite diverse, but most of them still come from what we call the first world, the weird kind of countries. But we do have increasing representation from places like Brazil, and because I'm in Hong Kong, then I get to work and know a lot of people from mainland China. So more and more, I'm hoping that the people from other countries like Global South will come. I spend some time going around the world and trying to recruit people. So if you are, wherever you are, and you want to join us, we're very happy to have you. So this is the core team. In addition, there's all these guided thesis students. Some of them are undergraduates and some of them are master's students. But underneath it all are these 365 around undergraduates in all of my courses starting from 2018 that took part in this. So what did we actually do? I don't know if you're familiar with judgment decision making, but there's this mapping of cognitive biases, what's referred to as heuristics and biases. And if you look up in Wikipedia, you'll see countless biases, a big collection of all sorts of biases that seem almost disconnected from each other. And then some people try to make sense of this. So I decided, okay, I really want to know the judgment and decision-making domain well. So I'll revisit all of the classics. I'll try and sample from each one of those. I'll reproduce all the stimuli in the materials. I'll rerun the experiments with the students. I'll try to reaffirm the findings and then identify some errors and gaps. Not only are we going to run replications, but the students will also work on extending the replication. So you do a replication and an extension that adds some kind of insight. It could be an insight about the possibility of a failed replication. It could be an insight that has to do with integrating into that replication something from the follow-up literature that can help take the literature forward. And then at the end, once we have a lot of those, and by now we have over 100 of those, you can try and find some links and see what fits what. And in some of the things that were visited before but lost interest, we hope to reignite the interest so that other people will go back to the classics and look at those. So after 5 years, this is basically a summary of the core project. So we completed about 80 of pre-registered studies with actual data collection. I have about 40 of registered reports stage 1. I think about half of them are finished already with stage 2 data collection. We also do all kinds of meta-analysis, and we aim to do these as registered reports or pre-registered. We also run prediction markets. So for each one of these effects, we ask people in the community on Twitter with paid prediction markets in all sorts of platforms, do you think this will replicate? So we ran 3 of those. And I think the biggest contribution that we have perhaps is these 20 open collaborative guides and templates that you can go and you can use for your own research. We also set up a Google Scholar for the team, so you can see, like, you can register to this and keep track of all the publications, and it's like slowly growing. It's nice to see that within the last 2 years we've had a lot of things coming up, coming out from this collaboration. If you want to know how I teach this and how I'm able to accomplish this in my courses, so everything that I do in the spirit of open science is also true for teaching. So you can see everything that I do in my courses. So how do I interact with the students? What is it that I teach? How do I teach open science? And you can download all of the slides and all the handbooks and everything that we do, including what the students do on the open science framework. So students coming in to the courses need to understand, and we align these expectations that everything that they do is going to be shared with the world. To some of them, it's a little bit intimidating, but after a while, I think they accept and are quite excited about the world being part of the process. So I want to show you what the process generally looks like. So we had 2 types of projects. One of them is with actual data collection. This is what we did in the first 2 years. And then we shifted towards registered reports stage 1 without data collection. So these here with the data collection were really intense because we had to do this within 1 semester. So it basically means that a month and a half, we analyze the replication targets, we write the pre-registrations, we produce randomly generated data sets from the Qualtrics that they design, and we write the data analysis code on the random generated data set. Once we have this as a complete pre-registration, let's say after a month or so into the semester, we get some external feedback. So I went on Twitter and I said, students are working on replications. Who wants to help us? And then to my great surprise, a lot of people came into the students' open Google Docs and gave some comments. And then we saw them as being participants, as collaborators in this kind of initiative. In addition, what is peer review over here is that we typically, for every target, had 2 teams of 2 students working independently. And then peer review just means that they switch. So each team peer reviewed the other and received peer review from the other group. So that's how they experience some of the scientific process. After that, they have like a week of revising. So 1 week of feedback, 1 week of revising. And then there's like 2 or 3 weeks where I don't sleep and I just go to do pre-registrations for about, I don't know, 12, 15 projects. And I do the data collection online on Amazon Mechanical Turk, Cloud Research, or Prolific. And then I do the same kind of thing again and give them the data sets. So 2 teams working on the data analysis separately, and then they write their own reports, and then they do peer review to each other. Then I go on Twitter and I say, who wants to help? And then people come in and they give them comments. And then at the end, we have a very high quality APA style submission ready manuscript. Already this is an amazing achievement. If you'll see some of the outputs that the students do, it's absolutely remarkable. And it could be with some of the students ready for submission to a journal, but we don't submit this yet. We invite you, early career researchers from around the world, to come in, look at what the students did, verify this with your own independent analysis of going over the code, writing your R markdown. And then if you need and you want, you can make the discussion and the introduction stronger. And then you help us as the lead author, followed by the students, followed by the teaching assistants, and then me, to send this to a journal. So this is the first one with actual data collection. Over here, it's about the same process, only here there's no data collection. Within the whole semester, we do a registered report stage 1 draft. And once again, after this is written and the students finish the course, we invite early career researchers like you to come in and help us to submit this to a journal that supports registered reports. Within the last 2-3 years, I started doing all of the thesis with me as a peer community in registered report, which I'll talk a little bit about that. But rather than working together with a community, the students, the guided thesis students, work with me to submit this to peer community in registered reports, and then get feedback from the community, and then get an IPA, and then get to stage 2 submissions. So by now you've seen that I do quite a few of those. So you've got like 120 altogether, and I've done this over 5 years. And the main questions that usually come up here is that it's great. Seems like a really nice education exercise. So students learn a lot from this. But how do we know that this is high quality science? Can students really do high quality science? Can early career researchers really deliver on open science? Does this really have any impact? Can they contribute to the community? So my answer is without any doubt, yes. And I'll start from the community collaborative open resources. So we have amazing guides, Jamovi, JASP, R Markdown, how to calculate effect sizes and confidence intervals, power analysis. So rather than the students always coming to me and saying, how do we do this? How do we do that? I just decided to do everything on Google Docs. And every time somebody asked me something and I had a response, I had a reply to them, I replied on the Google Doc, and then I just sent them a link to that. Sometimes, especially if it's guided thesis students, I would tell them, how about you first write what it is that you understand, and then I'll edit that and contribute on top of that. Then with teaching assistants, I also ask them, instead of replying directly to the students and then it gets lost, only that student gets that reply and then the others don't benefit from that, only work on Google Docs. And then in addition, once again, I went on Twitter and said, you know, we have this guide, who wants to help? And if you come in and you add something and you contributed meaningfully, just like everything else in the open science reform movement, you become a co-author. So even now, if you go and you contribute and you added something, and there's lots of room for you to collaborate and contribute something, there's a section there where you add what it is that you contributed, and then immediately when we do the next preprint, you're a co-author on that. So many things, like for example, how to do a Qualtrics template for mTurk, etc., etc. So by now we have like 20 something of these resources, and they're very well done. I think the one that's we use the most is this one, replication and extension main manuscript template. I think now it's more called like a register report manuscript template and a template for a supplementary. So it just helps you. It is a manuscript. If you want, I can demonstrate this after the talk, where you just see section by section what is it that you need to plug into every section. So this makes everything very simple for the students and the early career researchers. I also want to show you some of the impact, because I never dreamed that we'll get to this kind of impact. So at the beginning, people asking me, is this like publishable? Is this possible? It's just undergraduates at University of Hong Kong. Can we really bring this to the journals? So I want to show you that this is possible. So the model is that all the ones that are in italics at the beginning are early career researchers that were invited. All the underlined are actually undergraduate students. So you can see that all the students get credit. The star means that they're shared first co-author in a note, followed by the teaching assistants, and then me trailing at the back. So what you can see actually here is that everybody here, aside from me, are students and early career researchers, which for me is really inspiring. So this is 2021, 2022, and May 2023, we already have quite a few of those. And if you look at the journals that this gets into, at the beginning, I didn't even know if there's going to be interest in this. But if you come from social psychology, then some of the journals here, like Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, Even in economic psychology, some of the open science ones like meta psychology, SPPAS. So some of them are very high impact, reputable. So it's amazing that we were able to bring this all the way to the end with the help of the early career researchers that took the lead on all of those. Now, the direction of the last 2 years is that after I saw that this is succeeding, I became familiar with something that came out in 2021, which is the peer community in register reports. And I really am inspired by this. So a group of people, one of them is Chris Chambers, that started register reports, came up with this platform. And once I saw this platform, I just realized this is what I want to do. So even though it's not high impact, even though my university doesn't appreciate this, even though, career-wise, this is perhaps at this stage not a good thing to do, I feel like I want to contribute to this. I want to be part of this because to me, this is a real revolution. This is what is referred to as Register Report 2.0. And just very briefly, what are register reports? So this is the general model that is, in my view, completely broken, that has all sorts of issues, where you submit the paper for peer review after you've collected the data and after you've written everything. And then many times you get rejected. So in many of the journals that have rejection rates of about 80, 90%, most probably you'll get rejected. And it could be all sorts of things that have to do with outcome bias, hindsight bias, all sorts of things that lead to a big publication bias in the literature. But register report is such an intuitive model. When I talk to my students about register reports, they're just amazed that this is not the way that science is typically done. And this is where you do a pre-registration plan, and then you submit that to peer review. And if something is not right and something needs to be corrected, you get feedback on this and you just correct it. No problem. Once you and the reviewers and the editor arrive at the conclusion that this is the best plan for your theory and your predictions, then you get an in-principle acceptance, which means that whatever the outcome is, it's going to be published. And then the stage 2 peer review is done just to make sure that you've adhered to the stage 1, that you've documented your deviation, and there's some justifications for these deviations, and it all makes sense. So everything just seems like this is the right way to do science. I really don't understand how we developed this very broken way of doing things. So I really wanted to do more of register reports. So what is this PCIRR? It's a nonprofit, non-commercial, free, researcher-run super journal platform for conducting journal-style peer-reviewed or register reports across all research fields. What does this even really mean? So it's broken down here, and I want to tell you why I decided to shift all of the core team into doing all of that. One of the things that I think prevents a lot of people from doing register reports is saying register reports take a lot of time. So it's true that if you write a pre-registration plan and you submit this to a journal, it might take 4 months for you to hear back, and then you have revisions, and then it's another 4 months. So it could be like a whole year before you can actually get to the data collection. Peer community in register reports is unbelievable because they guarantee a scheduled review to give you peer review within 2 weeks. They do this magic by asking you to submit 6 weeks before you want the review to happen. You submit a 1-page snapshot. You tell them what is it that's going to happen in the full stage 1 that you're going to submit. And then they go and they recruit reviewers based on that snapshot, telling them, we're going to receive the submission on this date. Please clear your schedule for the week afterwards. And then everybody together aligns to that date. And then you can get your peer review within 2 weeks after that. At the beginning, I admit I was skeptical, but we've done many of those and they've delivered every time. It's unbelievable. Another evolution is that once you get an endorsement from the community, you decide where you want to submit this. So there's friendly journals that automatically will publish what is endorsed by the community. So rather than first trying, let's say, JSP, and then trying another, I don't know, psychological science, and then trying reject, and then finally getting to the end, you go to one target, which is the community. And if the community endorses this, you can choose which one of the friendly journals you want to publish with. So it really gives all the power to you. And many of the friendly journals that are supportive of this right now are very prominent open science journals. And another thing that is important to me, and I really believe in this, that you can demand, you can put a flag where you say, I only want open, identifiable peer review. And I think this is really important so that you can track in every step what everybody said. And you can also give credit to the reviewers because really in a registry report, there's no reason for any hostility. There's no reason for criticism. Sometimes I really want to give them co-authorship because they've been so nice in checking my code or giving me some contribution that I haven't thought of before. So I think it's a way, having open, identifiable peer review allows the community to really evaluate how the peer review was done, and then allows you to credit, especially many of the peer reviewers in peer community and registry reports are early career researchers. You can credit them and say, thank you for being part of this. Here's the DOI, and see that they contributed to my project with this. So lots of amazing benefits. Scheduled reports 2-3 weeks. Peer reviews conducted on preprints. 30 journals supported, and everything is open inside reviews. How many of those did we do? So after we shifted, every thesis student that works with me submits their thesis to peer community and register reports. So every year I have between 6 and 10 guided thesis students. So you can see some of them are already published by the community. So I think already after the in-principle acceptance, once we got the in-principle acceptance, some of the editors contacted me and said, we saw that you got endorsed by the community. We want you to publish with us. So one example is Collabora Psychology. So Semin Vazir contacted me and said, this looks great. Would you publish with us? And for us, it's like, yeah, Collabora Psychology is a great journal, believes in open science, great editorial team. So let's just go ahead and do that. So the first two, for example, are published in Collabora Psychology. This just happened this morning, got endorsed by the community. And then we have a bunch of them that already received stage 1 in principle acceptance. And then all of these are ongoing. So all of the thesis students working with me have submitted. So you can see some of them are with guided thesis students, some of them are with early career researchers that took over the undergraduates' work in my courses. So if you want, at the end, we can come back to this and I can show you exactly what this looks like. What does a registry report look like and how it's open? But I'll just, I think there's a few hidden slides in there. I might come back to this. If you want to hear about this, not from my perspective, but rather from the students that work with me. So you have an example here with Nadia. Nadia actually had 2 different publications coming in. One, what she did with me in my courses, and then she asked to be a guided thesis student. So one from the courses, one from the guided thesis student. So she was able to accomplish 2 different publications based on this initiative, the core team. Then Cora over here is a master's student. Usually master's students don't really do any like hard science work. It's more like practical stuff, but she did some great stuff on the better than average effect. If you want to hear from the early career researchers, you can go and check out what GA in here did with us. I think she already has 2 of these. And then Max and Hero did both Psychology Today post where you can read about their experiences. And Max here also gave a talk at HKU describing his experience being part of the core team. Adrian did a bunch of stuff with us. I think the most important thing that he did with us is that he developed together with us some of the meta-analysis register report templates. So if you want to do a meta-analysis as a register report, you can go and listen to Adrian. And it's just nice to see how involved he is and how things happen at the end, publishing all these, the work that he's done with us. So I asked some of them to kind of summarize their experiences with registered reports and working with us in core team. I won't go into this in great detail, so I just like summarize things. So Chinyu here, he was the first one to try a registered report with me. And he said, you know, from all these texts, I summarized this as that it reduces your uncertainty, it gives you more confidence to catch errors in design, especially if you don't feel confident as an early career researcher, as a student. If you submit your plan to the community, to the journal, then they help you catch some of the issues in the methods and in the design, the thinking about that project. It gives you peace of mind because you don't have to guess anything. If you got an in-principle acceptance, whatever the outcome is, just follow the plan. And for him, we weren't really sure if he's going to be able to finish this within his 1-year MPhil, but it did save time. He was able to complete the whole thing with a journal with less than one year. He also wrote, the reviewers really contributed meaningfully, and it helped the project, the manuscript, become a lot stronger. So he recommends this. I strongly recommend ECRs and research students in their first or second year to try register reports. So this was register report. How about peer community in register reports? So Ikan is a PhD student in Maastricht University, and he wrote this to me like a couple of days ago when I asked him to reflect on this journal. And this is like a summary of what he wrote. I learned a lot. It's nice that everything is like pro open science. Peer community is really the top standards of open science. You get a lot of support and feedback. We got a lot of very positive, constructive feedback from the reviewers. And you can see that you're not alone in this. You're really part of the community, and it's really feasible and highly rewarding. One of the students that did the guided thesis with me, what's his experience about peer community and register reports. So strongly recommend this, valuable feedback from the reviewers, understanding the academic process a little bit better. So Kirk is now in MPhil after he did his undergraduate. So he did a thesis with me and he did a course with me. So he decided that he wants to check out academia. So before you check out academia, you can become part of the academic process in this peer community. And time management is really a key for the success, and scheduled PCIRR really allows you to do that. So if you want to join us, there's all sorts of things that you can do. We have about, I think, 30 of completed projects with data collection that are waiting for you to take a lead over. We have about, I think, 10 or 20 register reports, stage 1, written by the students that you can come in and take lead over. Some of the people that I've met when I went around the world asked me, what is the best way for us to implement this where we are? And then I said, just take everything that we have, translate this to your language, and then run this again. So this morning, actually, I saw an email that wraps up the Brazilian project, where they took some of our replications, they just translated everything to Portuguese, they ran this on a Brazilian sample, and then, especially with this, it's really remarkable to see that the Brazilian sample was almost one-to-one with the sample that we ran in the US, and there's all kinds of implications for this. And they also took this further, so they added some extensions, and they implemented this with their own students in Brazil. So to me, this is all really inspiring. And you can see that everybody, not just in Hong Kong, not just in, like, let's say, top Ivy League universities, but anyone from around the world, regardless of cultural context or the background, can implement this. If you want, you can also collaborate with us on the primers, the guides, the opinion manuscript that you've seen. We have many of those. So just go check those out. And if you have something to add to this, then we'd love to have you as a co-author. In summary of all of this, we can come back and talk a little bit more about each one of these things. But to me, it's really important to shift towards big team science. We offer a different model in the core project where the ties are a little bit more tight. So we know each other, we know everything about the project from beginning to end. We work on things together, we support one another, we develop collaborative community resources together. And I really like this collaboration between the students and early career researchers. So students do something within a structure of a course or a thesis, and then early career researchers from whatever background can come in and pick up and build on that in order to bring this to a publication. And then hopefully at some stage after we have a generation or two, doing this, they will be able to get into postdocs. They will be able to get a tenure track position. They will be able to arrive at tenured position, associate professor, and all of that. And then we'll have open science, meta science, supportive faculty that really try and promote best practices of open science. So this is, I think, a good demonstration of an integration of research, education, and community, everybody working together. So leveraging everything that we do in the courses with the students towards real impact in the community. And everything that I was hoping for in 2016 and 17, it seemed like it really came to life. So I was able to implement this with the early career researchers and the students to do an open, systematic, and a very careful and humble scientific work using the latest best practices, open science. If it sounded to you like I'm the one who's always mentoring and supporting others, this is definitely not the case, because through the students, I was able to learn a lot. Each student, each early career researcher brings in an aspect of something that I'm not familiar with. So I think, if anything, I've built knowledge through the students. It's really amazing that almost in every collaboration with every project, I venture into new territories that I was not familiar with, and then I'm able to kind of connect this to the rest of the team. So this definitely has not been about me. It was more about my journey learning from early career researchers and students. If you want to know more about me, the core team, everything that we do, all the talks, meta science, open science, then everything that I just mentioned is on this website here. We also have a mailing list, so talks, new projects, new publications, preprints, like everything that comes out is where I think every 2 months we send out one of those. So if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing in core team, what I'm doing, then this is a good way to do that. If you have any questions about anything that you heard here and you want to follow up, you're very welcome to contact me. This is my email, one-on-one. If you know of the social, so there is a conference that comes up once a year that aims to support psychological science, called SIPS, of the Society for Improvement of Psychological Science. So this is happening in a couple of weeks. If some of you happen to be there, I'm going to be there. So if you want to also meet in person and talk about some of these things, I'm very happy to. So that's all from me for now. I'm happy to answer questions, and then we can follow up on some demonstrations if there's time and you feel like it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we learned a lot from the process, how you're working with students and early career researchers on the open science projects. And there are 2 questions in the chat right now. Do you want me to read it out, or you want to check the
chat? I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, any field is accepted to your team, right? I'm studying clinical psychology, so I want to ask you. So I think psychology is like broad enough, and there's so many links between the different domains that I think at some point we'll be able to come to like an understanding of something that we both care about. So for me specifically, I try and focus on judgment decision making. The reason why I'm focused on this, there's lots of reasons, but to me, of all the domains that I've seen, judgment decision making seems to be like one of the more reputable. So for example, some people ask me, so you ran 120 of those, what's your replication rate? Like if you said social psychology is 30 to 50, is this what you also find? But in judgment decision making in the classics, it's a non-random sample. So just based on the classics that I chose in judgment and decision making, our replication rate is something around 70%. So it seems like my intuition that judgment decision making seems to be of higher replication rate seems so far to hold. But I also want to say that one of the reasons why I chose this, not only because it seemed intuitively to me as something more reputable, but also things are a little bit more transparent, so you can see the scenarios. Things are usually a lot simpler, so there's usually like a main effect. So I would recommend that if you come from clinical psychology, we can find an effect that might have relevance in clinical psychology that we also care about in judgment decision making. So, for example, we study many things like stereotypes, how those come into play, the different biases that might contribute to these. And then this could be taken into directions of clinical psychology. So we start from something that's a classic. We start from something that's typically a main effect or a very simple interaction. And we try and build from classics that have the most transparency in terms of the scenario. So it's usually we run vignette studies. I'm not entirely sure about clinical psychology, but let's say in clinical psychology, I think there's more field work perhaps than social psychology. But I would recommend as a first stage, doing some lab studies in something that's very simple using vignettes. And once we have insights from that, then taking some of these insights and moving on to something that's more like in the field once we've established that things really replicate and are solid. So we have a few that are in the clinical psychology domain and have joined us to do some of the judgment decision-making related things, and then took this into their own thesis on their own domain. So there's that. I also want to say that in general, I think the process of working with students can apply to fields that are not just psychology. So in the university, I'm trying to promote this definitely in education, definitely in in the different social sciences. So we've got social work, for example. I think all of this working with students, incorporating real science projects in the undergraduates and master's courses, I think is something that we should do university-wide. And I just want to mention one thing. Many people ask, where is the money coming from? So you do data collection, right? So you need some money for this. And I have to say that I failed miserably at getting money for this from the research people, but the teaching people really love this stuff. So they're like, you're publishing with undergraduates, you're doing these within the regular curriculum. So this is really for them groundbreaking. So they give us some funding for this, and they especially liked register reports. So I suggested to them what's called the HKU Register Report Challenge. And the Register Report Challenge means that if you've done a project with us, you wrote a stage 1 register report, and this got an in-principle acceptance, that the university would fund your data collection up to something like 20,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is, how much is it? Like 2,500 US. So that's suitable. That's enough for you to do a nice data collection with a sample of like 1,000 participants online on Amazon Mechanical Turk, Cloud Research, or Prolific. So if you have this model, everybody wins. It's like risk-free for the university. The university only funds what it is that has been already accepted, in principle accepted to the journal. So this model can also be applied for clinical psychology, social work. You just write the plan. You haven't even done any data collection. You get the in principle acceptance from the journal, and then you come to the university and say, look at this. I have an in principle acceptance from the journal. Fund me. And it's very easy for the university to fund you when they already know that this is going to end up in a journal.
Okay, Gavin?
Thanks for that talk. I mean, this was like so inspiring to me. I got to say, really, really amazing stuff. And I guess as someone who has a similar narrative, although far less well developed, you've presumably had a career filled with challenges and feeling like you're pushing upstream the whole way. How much has institutional support from your current employer helped or hindered your progress? And what sort of top-down changes do you imagine could make the sorts of things that you're implementing here more commonplace?
Yeah, this is it's a good question to ask, because it's tricky. I'll be honest with you. I feel like I can share this with you, even if it's recorded and all that. The university is not happy with me focusing on that. If you ask, if you look at most of my colleagues at University of Hong Kong, or generally the way that Hong Kong academia is, the most important is as many publications as you can, but not in any journal, rather the top journals. So we have a ref. We try to aim at 4 stars. So starting from Science, Nature, PNAS, anything that's less, I don't know, from impact factor 8 is kind of like, why are you even bothering, right? And it used to be that every year in my annual review, I was asked, okay, all these replications and the education exercises is interesting, but where is your real research? Like, where is your real contribution? And the contribution tends to be perceived as, it has to be novel, it has to be groundbreaking, it has to be something that would change the field, and has to be something that would get media attention and would get the university the funding. Now, I'm in my last year before the tenure track application. I already know there are going to be some challenges with this. But I'm telling you all of this because I want to say I don't care, because I really care about everything that I do having meaning for me. So I think, and what I told the university many times is that rather than me changing what it is that I do in order to fit something that I don't agree with, I think you need to make me feel like I can do the research and the things that I believe in within your environment. And if there is a mismatch between this and the environment, I think it's a big world out there, and I'm happy to find a place where things are more aligned. How did I come to be part of this environment in Hong Kong? Because in Hong Kong is not the first place that comes to mind that would allow me to do this kind of thing, but I think they were the most accepting in allowing me. So when I was a postdoc and I went on job talks, typically people tell you, you must frame your research in a way that would be, I don't know, attractive to where you go. And don't talk too much about open science, especially not in 2016, 17. You know, this is not a good strategy for you. Try to focus on the things that you published, I don't know, psychological science. You know, this is what you should aim at. Say that this is what you want to keep doing. But I decided that whenever I give a job talk, I'm going to put this up front and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I care about. This is where I want to be in a few years. And I need your help to do this. And many places said no. So what, like we expected something else. To my great surprise, University of Hong Kong listened to what it is that I was hoping to do and said, yes, you can definitely do this here. We'll let you do this. Now, it wasn't without any challenges, because first when they said this, I honestly did not really believe them. I said, you know, first I need to come in and see that they're really going to give me this. But they really did. So they gave me some courses and they allowed me to revamp everything. So typically in a university, you need to go through lots of procedures and bureaucracy. You need to approve this, you need to approve that. I don't know any place that would allow me the kind of flexibility that University of Hong Kong gave me here. So that's a real advantage. So some days you need to go beyond what people are saying and just like look at how the procedures are over there. And it wasn't without any challenges, because the first time that I came in, my courses were very different from anything that the Hong Kong students have ever seen before. What do you mean there's no presentations? What do you mean you're not going to tell us? Where's the textbook? You know, what is the truth? We need a multiple choice exam at the end in order to get our A+. So, and at the beginning, there were lots of questions and to some extent complaints. And the university was asking me, it's like, what is going on with the courses? Like, what should we do about this? And I asked them, you know, just give me a year or two. If this doesn't work out, I'll give the courses, I'll get them back on track to what you're familiar with. But after 2 years, it became very clear that the students are gaining a lot from that. Not all of them, I would say 60, 70% are enthusiastic, but you always have 20, 30%, which seem to be the most vocal in a place like University of Hong Kong that cares about what students are saying. This was a challenge at the beginning. So You've got a challenge from people who keep track of your teaching. So first, do you have any flexibility? If you have flexibility, are the feedback from the system, is it good enough? You've got all kinds of challenges with research folks saying your research should be going in different directions. But at the end, I think what mattered to me the most is that each year, at the end of that year, was I able to meet the goals that I set for myself, and whether this promotes me, gets me into the long-term vision that I have for what I want my first 6 years, tenure track years to look like. And I think also we've shown as a proof of concept that this has a potential of being highly impactful. So I've never imagined this kind of research output. I never imagined this kind of feedback from the students. So I think before assuming that they're going to be, the challenges are going to completely wipe you out, or that nothing is going to work out, I think it's just worthwhile to see what's out there, learn from that, and give things a try. 1-2 years, and learn from every semester, every step that you take. I don't know what's going to happen with me next year with a channel track. It's also possible. I've seen other people, good people in open science, that have been kicked out of the system that I really was hoping are going to stay. But what I can say is that if I am not in the system, I feel like now there's 400, 450 students and early career researchers that are going to be left behind in the system. And if we get half of them, if we get 20% of them to get to high impact positions, both in academia and in industry, then I feel like this was worth it. At the end, everything that we have is transferable skills. So if this doesn't work out in academia, we'll find some other ways. I hope that I can contribute from within academia, and I can find a home for this. Could be even with the University of Hong Kong, I don't know. But it doesn't have to be. I'm very open to everything else. Challenges to me are not scary. I actually invite them. I am excited sometimes about overcoming challenges and proving to others who doubted what it is that I was trying that we can do better than they expected us to, and that we can succeed where others expected us to fail. So we'll see how this works out, but I understand how this can be scary. I hope that something in this process of what I shared would give you kind of like the courage to try and pursue your own direction and go sometimes like against the stream to implement what it is that you believe in, rather than what is it that the environment asks you to do.